and welcome to Stampscaping 101. I haven't done a video, kind of an instructional video, in a little bit of time. For me, over a week seems like, I don't know, it feels like months for me. And when I get busy doing certain types of things other than whatever it is I'm doing, I tend to focus completely on that. And when it comes to doing these videos and doing scenes, it kind of gets me, I have to get kind of back into the swing of it. Now, I think that's something that everyone can relate to. So I'll show you how I go about kind of getting back into the swing of things. I know it seems kind of weird, that I do scenes all the time, but I'm just like anyone else, when I get my focus on certain other things, you kind of have to get the gears, back in, kind of action again. For me, I tend to think it's maybe like a left brain, right brain hemisphere type of thing where you're looking for inspiration. Okay, so for me, when I'm getting back into stamping or any type of thing that's creative, what I do is I go through exercises. I don't kind of sit there and kind of, I don't know, kind of have some anxiety about coming up with something, an invention. I like to think about it like going back to doing, if you were a musician, you might be doing scales, okay? Now for me, it's just doing some kind of basic scene, okay? I might have a certain go-to scene that I'll do that I've done 100 times before. For me, it's typically Nature Sheet 8, and a lot of those images on there, and it has to do with Lakeside Cove Large. But for me, because I'm doing all these videos all the time, I have a lot of these, what I call stamp sketches, okay? They're just different types of compositions. Now, I've had a lot of them here, okay, that have really built up over the years. Some of them are just kind of compositional basics, just doing stamp sketches. I have a feeling that these ones probably came from the Blooms and Bridge how-to, or, compositional idea videos, because it's used here 3 different times, and these ones right here. So that's probably from something like that. I don't remember exactly. After I do these different types of scenes, I just kind of move on, and I don't really think about it too much, but I always keep these around. These aren't lost causes, because I can always go back and finish them off. In fact, when I'm stamping these things out, oftentimes, unless I go on to something else that kind of gets my mind off these, I really get the hankering to finish them off, because as I'm doing this, I'm kind of picturing some different types of opportunities about color schemes, time of day, time of year. These different types of compositions can be finished in. And when I start thinking about those different types of things, for me, I'm kind of a kinesthetic type of dominant sense individual. So if I get some kind of emotional kind of tie-in with some sort of notion on how these can look, it's hard for me to kind of move on without, just completely forgetting it or whatnot. But there's all kinds of different compositions right here. So again, going back to what I was talking about. Now this one, I don't know what it was. It's how to color some of these rocks or something like that. But there's all kinds of these compositions that I've done here in the past, and this isn't a bad way to work. Now this one's really finished off. Some of these might be demonstrations that I've done at conventions as well, just showing people how to generally compose things. This one might have been, just about the rocky peaks or something like this. Here it is, rocky peaks in the foreground, the clouds in the background. Here it is sandwiched between the two, okay? Now these are all, like I said, they all came from somewhere, and most of these are video lessons in the past. This one could have been the sedge filler or something like that, and how to use that. There's so much, or just how to do grassy terrain, maybe. I'm not really quite sure, but I don't know. There's a lot of them, and I was kind of shocked. My desk is really cluttered, okay? I have a lot of stuff all over it. Maybe it's not as cluttered as it could be, but I just consolidated all these from like several different piles, and I was kind of shocked at just how many of them I had. But I thought I would finish off, let's go for 3 of these, and it'll be pretty fast. I think I always say that, but then I get caught up in the details, and the video lessons last a little bit longer than what I thought they would. But in keeping things in the spirit of kind of expediency, in terms of finishing off, you know, 3 different cards like this, 3 very different ones. In terms of the composition, I feel maybe these 2 are a little bit similar, but this one right here it's kind of about, the composition's about openness, and I can add a lot of different things to this, like trees or whatnot, just like this one right here. This one's just using the tree cluster small, but just using, you know, different portions of it, so using partial impressions. I have video lessons on that. Sedge bank left and right, and some foliage right here in the foreground, but there's a different kind of a spiritual quality to this right here when you leave things kind of really open. It's like, you know, like a Zen garden or something like that, looking across into, you know, some sort of a thing like that. I tend to think that the deserts are kind of like that, you know, when you think about kind of grass, you know, or vast open expanses, you know, be it whatever types of texturing that are in there. And of course, the tropics, you know, kind of bring, you know, conjure up different types of temperatures and imagery, and just overall kind of a different type of feeling. But I'll show you how we can address these. Maybe in, you know, in a very simplistic way. I'm just going to do it in blue tones, okay? Blue tones to me tend to represent, well, for certain, you know, it's temperature, in that it's a cool temperature. But it could be anything from something very cool to just something that's kind of cooler in terms of like a nighttime type of scenario. Okay? All right, now what we're going to do, now these are all stamped on some glossy cardstock. This is 10-point glossy cardstock right here. And I'm going to finish these off with dye-based inks. Okay, now if these were on, some of these were on matte paper, maybe I would use some hybrid inks or something like that, or I'd kind of mix it up. But let's just go really simple. Like I said, I want this to kind of move along and not take too much time. Here's some Marvy pads right here. Here's some Distress inks. I don't have a lot of Distress inks, you know, not like some of you, in pad form, okay? But the ones that I didn't have in pad form, I just bought the re-inker for it, okay? Because when I use a lot of my inks, unless I'm stamping out imagery in a pad, okay, a lot of times I just want the ink for the color because I'm coloring things with it. Now there's more ink that comes in a re-inker bottle than comes in a pad, okay? Now, this isn't the coinciding pad or something like that, but this pad holds less ink than what this ink has in a bottle. So there's a certain type of convenience that comes with a pad like this, but it's not inconvenient just to use the re-inker form of the ink that you want. All you do is you just put it on something like this, and if you're applying inks with a certain type of applicator, that is really easy to go with, okay? And, you know, when we're talking about doing 3D scenes like this, and, you know, I want it to go fairly quickly, that's a really good way to go, because you really apply quite a bit of ink at any given time, okay? Now this is just an old kitchen sponge. You can see it was actually falling apart, so I just tore it in half and tore it into smaller pieces like this. You know, here's some more pieces of it right here, or another piece of it right here. It's probably like that. I think I just cut it with a scissor or something like that. Now I've added some water to this just to make it a little bit softer, okay? But I squeezed it out so that it wasn't just completely saturated with water. I don't want that, okay? I just want it to be overall kind of damp so that when I take the ink up into it, it won't be so diluted from so much water mixing in with that ink. Okay, now this one's a tumbled glass. For me, I like to start kind of light in terms of my hue, and I like to work into my darker tones, okay, gradually. Now, that's not always the, you know, the methodology, but in general, That's what I'd like to do, because it doesn't make such a big commitment to a certain hue by going really dark. Now, there are certain other types of techniques where I just do black, you know, and I go grayscale, but on this one, not something like that. Okay, now let me talk to you about my approach on something like this. Okay, now we just have all this meadow in here, okay? And I don't like to go for just a monotonous kind of notion of lighting within a scene, okay? Now, on this one right here, it has the sedge filler used across here several times. If I have this on my... Let's see, I don't have the sedge filler. I don't know. For those of you who know the line, you know what stamp I'm talking about. I think I don't have it here. But anyways, you can see kind of this different slopes that I've added it, and I've added this texture going this way, and then you can see it going up this way, and then there's another little line in the back, okay? Now, there's a lot of different approaches you can use on this, but I'm just going to go with some color like this, okay? Now, what I always talk a lot about in my videos is the oscillation of light and dark, okay? So you can see where I've applied this color right across here. It's a fairly light blue, right? Because this is tumbled glass. It's light to begin with in value. And also it's been diluted a little bit, okay? But now let's oscillate this, okay? Instead of just seeing this as one big field of light or a certain color, you know, a lot of people would do this just as green, okay? And that would be fine too. You can do this as a daytime scene where you see actual hue. Maybe a lot, you know, some people don't know that, you know, in terms of visually, but, you know, because we don't go out and kind of observe, you know, and take notes of nature or something like that. But a lot of people's notion of grass is just always green. You know, if you're here in California, you would probably be thinking that, you know, as well. But, you know, we live in hillsides that are mostly brown, you know, because of, you know, the lack of rain. At least, I don't know, in Southern California. But see how I've kind of arrange this where it's a little bit darker, darker, darker like that, but I left a little bit of light here, okay? So I'm just thinking about lighting when I'm thinking about something like this. I do think about color, you know, I do, you know, green grass sometimes, just like anyone, but you can really change kind of the spirit of it around in terms of lighting and anything like that, okay? Now, as I do this across all of these different scenes right here, you'll hear me talking about the oscillation of light and dark, okay? And that's where I'm not only coloring a scene, but I'm also defining light, okay? So right in here, I've added some light up here. Now, it's really hard to tell right now because there's not a lot of contrast in here, just using one color, and a very light one at that. But so if you can see that darker streak up here, and I've left a little horizon light down there, okay? But then it goes dark, a little bit of light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, and light down here, okay? So that's the difference between someone coloring in everything, all right, and coloring and lighting something at the same time. It just means that you retain some of those lighter areas, okay? And it doesn't really matter too much. It's not as important what you leave light and dark, okay? As much as what you might think about when you're approaching this, if it's kind of causing you some stress, like, oh my gosh, I can't see it, okay? A lot of people feel that when they're approaching something like this, and that oscillation of light and dark, or creating scenic lighting, it stresses them out that they can't kind of preconceive a certain lighting scheme, okay? I don't even think about that. I'm not thinking about it at all, and it's not something that's naturally born or something like that. Well, a lot of people kind of want to relate to whatever I'm doing in stamping. They think, oh my gosh, you just have this natural talent or something like that. I'm not doing that. I'm seeing light and dark in here as I do it. I'm creating it. So if I'm doing that, okay, on this blank piece of paper, if I go like this, what do we have? Light, dark, light, dark, okay? All right? That's all I'm doing right there, all right? Okay, now let's take a look in here. Let's just reiterate this again, okay? I have my color in here. We have a different type of scenario in here, but again, it's just this oscillation of light and dark. In here, though, we have these two Palm Island impressions, okay? Now for me, when I see that, that's an opportunity for shadow, okay? So at the base of these, it's going to be darker, okay? But let's just oscillate. Let's just do this right here, okay? Now I've added a little bit of that darker blue just so you can see, you know, this a little bit stronger than this one. Well, let's just do it here, okay? Watch this. I'm coming across like this. I'm using a light touch too. People say that a lot of times they say, I can't get, you know, I can't not go hard. Well, I mean, if you're applying, I kind of always say this, I have people imagine they're applying like makeup or something on a sponge to like a child's face, you know, and we're not, if we go on a child's face and, you know, or something like that, we're not going to be digging down into their face, okay? So I think you can control that. So if you can control that type of notion, then you can do that on your scene right here, okay? So watch this right here. We have dark, light, dark right there, right? It just means you leave a little streak of light up there. Okay, let's do the same thing down here in the water. You'll see how easy it can be. Now you can do this thing if you're doing it on matte paper with, let's say, chalks or pastels or colored pencil. Just oscillate things. Think about a checkerboard. Think about checkerboarding, the notion of checkerboarding something. Okay, now it doesn't mean you have to do things in squares, okay? But just kind of oscillate things a little bit more. Okay? Than not, okay? So anyways, let me try to create this a little bit more distinctly here. So it's a little bit more obvious, but okay, so here we go. It's a little bit of light down here. See this little bit of light right here? So it's going dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, and a little bit of light down here because we have that breaking, crashing wave right there. Well, what is these streaks right there? It's just this right here. And that's the same thing that's going on here. This one that's a little bit more, you know, because there's this slope right here. I've just kind of angled it down like this, okay? You know, it kind of angles, well, it's going the opposite way. It's going like this. Okay? Let's see how that goes like that. So you're just kind of going, something like that. Okay? And it doesn't matter if it's sky, open sky, or, you know, terrain down here. Okay? Now on this one right here, if I wanted to add green to this, it would be a green meadow because blue is a component of green. Okay, so anyways, I used some of that darker blue up there, so let's add this in here so you can see it a little bit more distinctly, okay? In terms of that oscillation. Now the thing is, you know, you have to get kind of the feel of color application, you know, if it's ink like this. What happens is a lot of times when people start moving into the darker tones, sometimes they eradicate all the light that they've established with the lighter colors of whatever hue you're going with. So you just have to be kind of put the brakes on things, you know, and use color a little bit more selectively the darker we go, okay? But let me see if you can see that oscillation of light and dark. Okay, now this is kind of for me an exercise, okay? It's teaching me to kind of focus on lighting as well, you know, when I'm talking about, you know, it feels like I haven't stamped in a while, you know. It's not going to be that long in terms of, you know, how long some people go without doing, you know, scenic stamping or something like that. But when I'm doing this, it's just kind of getting ink, you know, in your medium, in your hands, and getting that feel for it, okay? But when I'm doing this, I'm not thinking about too much in terms of the imagery. I'm definitely looking at it, okay? But these palms right here, I'm just thinking about shadow, okay? I'm not thinking about color too much. You might think I would be, but I'm kind of more looking for the light. So as I apply the dark, okay, most people And understandably so, you're thinking about that color, okay? You're thinking about blue, and you're looking at that blue being applied, okay? Now, I'm not looking at that. But the thing that I'm looking at a lot of times and I'm focusing in my head, it's kind of a mindset. But when I'm looking at that, when I'm applying this, I'm more looking at that light right there, okay? Or there's a certain percentage of it. Maybe I'm looking at that light that's being retained, like 80%, let's say, of my focus, or 70% is thinking about that light right there as I apply the color, okay? That way, when I'm doing this, you see, I retain that light. There's a better chance of me retaining the lighting in that scene when I'm focusing on it mentally as I'm applying the darker tone. See, as I'm going like this, I'm looking at that light right there, and I'm seeing how that light changes, okay? So I'm going like this, and applying, okay? Now see, that's how I retain that lighter area in there, okay? And I get it. It's easy to lose your lighting in there, especially let's say if I'm going with a really super juicy wet ink pad and I go like this, and you drag it out, and at the end of that drag, it's just as juicy as it was when you first laid it down here. Okay, normally when you go like this and you go like that, it's going from wet to dry. But if it's a really super juicy applicator, you might go like this and you might go like that. And the end of that swipe right there, instead of it tapering off, is just as juicy. So, that being said, just be aware of the amount of ink that you're applying onto your paper. There's certain types of paper dynamics. If I was doing this on some of the paper that I was using recently, a silk weight paper, it's really absorbing my ink really fast. Faster than glossy cardstock. That tends to keep the a lot more of the media on the surface of the paper, more so than a or a less coated paper, like a matte, or a silk weight one. Okay, this one has this horizon right here with the Seaside Cove. This was probably a Seaside Cove composition lesson. I'm going to hit that horizon line a little bit harder here. Okay. Easiest mask in the world is Seaside Cove, just with that straight line. See that right up there? But look how that really oscillates that. It goes from dark, light, dark, light, dark. And like I said, there's a little bit of light down here. But I'm really going to focus in on a lot of that darkness in here. Okay, so I've been blabbing on a lot here. But I don't know. That's kind of an important aspect to lighting. Okay. See, as I'm applying this, I'm looking at that tone that's up there. Okay, these are two people going for they're going to be going for a midnight hike, or coming back from a long hike maybe, because it's going to be blue. It's going to be, it's supposed to be 106 degrees in Southern California in 2 days from now. That's the hottest weather report that I remember seeing. That's not kind of like in the desert or something like that. So, one of the nice things about scenic stamping, wherever you want to kind of transport to, emotionally or whatever, mentally, maybe not emotionally, mentally, you can create in stamping. Or there's a certain type of environment, So if I want to cool down a little bit, all I do is I just stamp something nice and cool. A lot of times in the winter months, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's so cold. For here, I'm saying. I don't complain about weather anymore after I visited places like Maine and whatever, where they're telling me out there it's It's nothing to lose your power out there in the wintertime, you know, at times for like a week or, I don't know, it's like several days. You know, I don't complain about weather after that. And, you know, we travel out to places like Arizona and stuff, and Nevada, whatever. And I've spent a lot of time out in the deserts as well. I just got back from Death Valley, but I don't know. But that doesn't mean I don't get uncomfortable and I want to stamp something cool. Okay. All right, now here, this one is a little bit more subtle. Okay. But there's that oscillation of light, dark. Here's dark, light, a little bit darker here, a little bit lighter right here. You know, dark, light, dark. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that, okay, let's say if I left it light over here and darker here, is that wrong? No, it isn't wrong. It's just, you know, there's variation. And when you create variation in value, in intensity, warmth, hue, whatever, this one's going to be monochromatic, so it won't be hue, but you potentially expand on all those different aspects of color. If you're working in color, you can do it in black and white too, and it can just be, you know, kind of textural changes and whatnot. But when you expand the range of all these different aspects of visuals, you potentially make your pieces richer as a result, right? Because there's more variation and change that's happening on them. Okay, so we can look at it right here, you know. These are different compositions right here, but they're all the same in terms of my lighting, okay? Let's go like this, okay? It all goes from darker, then it goes light, and then it goes dark, light, okay? Dark, here, let me put a little switch right here. I'll vary this a little bit more. So it goes dark, light, light, dark, light, dark. You get the idea, okay? All right. I'm not going to spell it out like that. I've already done that too many times on this video right here. I don't know. That's what I used to do in my classes. I'd reiterate things. I don't know. There's like 3 or 4 things that you just kind of reiterate over and over and over and over and over again. You know, there's a lot of things that, you know, people are remembering from, you know, compositions and things like that that I talked about, but you know, a lot of the things that you do are just kind of, they're part of the fundamentals of it, you know, in terms of lighting and color application and whatnot. I'm working with this nothing cheap sponge here, so a lot of people, you know, when I'm doing it with this, you know, the stylus tools like that, they thought, okay, in order to use Stampscapes, you have to use the stylus tool. Not everyone thinks that, but a lot of people new to Stampscapes or whatnot, they feel that that is a necessary type of tool, but it isn't, okay? So, I'm not using that too much these days. I don't know, I feel like it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of cheating the viewers of the videos, especially if they don't have one of those tools. You know, the stylus tools are no longer being produced by the manufacturer because the manufacturer went out of business. But you know, you can use anything. A paper towel is a really great tool too. But when you're doing some kind of like monochromatic, or it doesn't have to be monochromatic, but this, you know, little kitchen sponge is a perfect tool for it, and has the exact properties that you'd want in some sort of application tool, because it both absorbs and it can squeeze out very well. My fingers just tend to get very inky by the end process as opposed to using the stylus tool. Okay, so I just used Broken China. It's a darker blue. Let's go up the value scale in this one. Let's move into this one's just called blue. It's just a Marvy blue. It's kind of a little bit more of a navy blue. I don't think it's going to be too dark on here because I have a a lot of that other ink that's already in there. I'm just using the same side with each one of these, okay? All right, now here's where you're going to put on the brakes a little bit. As you're doing this, as you're applying this, be mindful of your light. So when you're applying dark blue, look at your light in here and think about retaining it, okay? You don't have to retain all of it. You can put a streak of some of this blue into it, but you have a very light version of it, okay? Because in this type of process right here, this type of ink application, you can really get a lot of mileage out of your inks because you're not only using the ink in its full saturation, but you can also use it in its variations of all those values, right down to white. All right, I think this sponge is almost too wet because it's not, I want it to go a little bit darker, or a lot darker, okay? But having it really soaked like this really is making it easy to apply. You can see I can even do like a really smooth streak on the cheapest and most absorbent of all papers, which is like, well, it's not, you know, it's like toilet paper or something like that, but kind of papers, you know, like this is just standard copy paper that I'm, you know, stamping on right here. All right, but can you see that distinction of light and dark becoming a little bit more apparent the darker you take things, okay? Now, you might not take it in all the way that you did with the lighter tones. You can kind of be a little bit more perimeter oriented if you want to. You can just, I don't know, you can let your eye be the judge of it, okay? I like to go kind of dark right around the at the base of my objects, okay? Be it an island like that, or in this case right here, trees. I like to kind of put a stronger shadow at the base of them to kind of anchor them down in there. And when you do that, it creates kind of this sense of opacity and, again, light direction, because if you have backlit lighting, chances are it would be creating shadows, you know, like that, being cast by that light, right? Okay. Kind of blend it all out, but again, be mindful of your lighting that you have in here, okay? Try to retain it as much as possible. If you eradicate, it doesn't have to be the white of the paper, okay? But if you eradicate all your lighting, it's like, oh my god, I lost my lighting. Don't worry about it. Just when you get into another color that's even darker than the one you're going with, kind of reestablish that lighting. It doesn't make the area that you've gone over lighter, but by contrast, it will stand out as lighter if you take something darker right next to it, okay? I'll just put another streak in here. Here's what I do sometimes. An area of light like that, I just divided it in two, so it goes, instead of going dark, light, dark, it goes dark, light, dark, because you've bisected it right there, okay? So let's bisect it a little bit more like that. See that right there? It's kind of like a sky or whatnot, you know, with that little area up there. You can do the same thing for this water. See, this water right here is all light. And if you want to bisect it, you just kind of come across there like that. There you go. And then you have these kind of striations, kind of horizontal striations in the scene. And, I don't know, it adds to the overall richness of the scene because you have an even stronger sense of that oscillation of light and dark, okay? Now, the more that I use this one color on here, I'm getting a stronger version because those lighter colors are, you know, being applied, so it's more of the pure version of this darker one in here now. Yeah, there we go. going to have a kind of a different mood to it, you know, when you apply these tones on there. This one, any one of these would be fantastic in sunset colors too. You can apply yellows and oranges and reds or whatever, you know, something like this one. This one could have been a kind of a drier meadow with brown tones and golden, you know, dry grass, you know, with a sunset color, you know, up in the sky. You know, it could have been that too. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would do a, you know, a tropical scene like this with snow in it or something like that, but you can pretty much do any type of color scheme you want in a scene. You know, the scene, the composition itself doesn't dictate the colors that have to be used on it, okay? And like I said, there might be some types of scenes that, you know, where some colors might look, you know, I don't know, might look out of place, but I don't know. I haven't kind of come across any, you know, that type of thing before, where I felt kind of limited in terms of my, I don't know, interpretation of the composition. All right, so there you have that. Okay. Now for this tropical one right here, one of the things that I like to do is I like to kind of warm it up a little bit. Let's go with, now I already have this darker blue on here, so unless I use a different portion, I think that's nasty sponge right here. I was going to use a paper towel, but I'll just use the other side of this. This is how my fingers get all inky, because I use all portions of these sponges sometimes. This is a Caribbean blue. It has a little bit of green in it, and I really like that color added to my blue colored scheme. It warms things up, you know, when I was talking about kind of expanding on the range of aspects of color. You know, one of the aspects of color is temperature. You know, there's hue, what color it is, and intensity is the relative brightness, bright and dull. Value is light and dark, and temperature is warm and cool. So suddenly we've taken this green right here, which is an analogous color to blue on the color wheel, and you can make that area down here kind of glow a little bit. Okay, that's how you create color glows, is you take colors that are next to each other on the color wheel and you place them next to each other. Okay, so here's a little bit of a different, you know, look to it. Okay, there's a lot of range in terms of temperature here, but this one's the one that goes into the warm tones. We could apply it on this one too. Maybe I'll use it a little bit on this grass right here. Okay. I suddenly forgot which side I had this one on. So again, just be mindful of your lights and darks in here. Now, if you ever establish anything that's light in somewhere, and if you know, you want to darken it up, then darken it up. It doesn't have to be, you know, stay as light as it is, okay? But you just want to have control over that, over your manipulation of it, you know? It's better than just kind of going like this and saying, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that, you know? You just kind of establish what you want, and you make your adjustments as you go along. Okay, now this is a Prussian blue. It's really dark in terms of all the different values of blue out there. I'd always recommend getting a range of hue, okay? It doesn't have to be a huge range. Now, blues are just one of those colors that happens to be used a lot in scenic stamping. I would get, you know, a fairly decent range of it. Light, medium, and dark. You know, something like this in whatever brand you're working in. Okay, but if you can find a really dark one too, those really come in handy in terms of the blues. With other colors, I don't bother quite as much because I can always mix. Like, let's say if I don't have a really dark green, okay? Well, if you apply a dark blue over green, it's not going to look like a dark blue. It's just going to look like a darker green. So you can use this in your darker green range, like something like this, okay? It's just green, darker green, blue, but this blue is just going to look like a darker green. It's not going to look like a blue, okay? Because these are all transparent colors, and the colors that you lay down underneath top layers, the underlaying colors will always show through and influence what you can see as an end result. Okay? It's not real complicated or anything like that. I mean, it just comes to say that, let's say if I have yellow down here and I put a pink over the top of it, it's not going to look pink, it's going to look orange. So just, kind of the basic notions of color layering, okay? Transparent colors, I should say. All right, do you see that real strong sense of lighting kind of coming into play here? It's because I've just left areas in each, whatever, distant zone, whatever, lighter in some areas. Okay? This one's easy. It's just you leave certain areas like right in the middle of the scene. They're just lighter. Okay? Here comes the Prussian blue on this tropical one. Right. You can do the same type of thing with alcohol pens, whatnot. You just lay down your lighter tones and kind of work into your darker tones. If you want to create a little bit of vignette like I'm doing here, then you lay down your darker tones on the perimeter. Maybe use your blender to blend things in. You can use your alcohol markers on this too, right over the top of dye-based inks, to get in some kind of harder to reach areas. Mix and match your media. It doesn't have to be one thing or another. You use whatever media that suits whatever purpose you're using the best, okay? Now what I'm doing is I'm laying down transparent media in the form of dye-based inks right here, but I can't get into some of these little areas real well with this, so I can definitely get into them with a pen like this and get into these. This is this blue right here. I can definitely get into these waves right here, right, with a pen. So you use whatever tool works best for that given purpose. You don't have to kind of go into something thinking, okay, I'm going to use dye-based inks, therefore it's not a project for my alcohol markers or whatever. Okay, all right. I think our lighting is established pretty well in these pieces. And do you see the similarities? Fairly different compositions right here. But the same type of lighting concept, you can see that oscillation and these streaks of dark tones defining the light areas in here, okay? All right. Let's go to black, okay? That's what I was thinking about there when I was holding that. I was thinking, should I use the black in there? Might as well. Okay. With the black tone, I don't know, it tends to be used for shadows, to darken the vignette around on the perimeter. Using whatever color you stamped out your darkest things in the toning process often brings a real kind of continuity to the piece. It doesn't mean it has to be as dark as this, okay? This could be a high noon scene where it's very light, but if you use a little bit of black, let's say, in the shadows or something like that, even if it's a very light application of it, it tends to be a great binder for all the different imagery that you have used within the piece, okay? So it can just be a very light shade of gray, okay? Which means it's just a lighter application of that given hue. Okay, now here I'm just kind of putting in a few little taps underneath some of these trees so that they're casting a little bit of shadow. Okay, let's do the same thing for here. Hope you can kind of see kind of the changes that are happening with each one of these given hue. Nothing's a really gigantic leap from one pad to the next. Okay, it's just I just go a little bit darker each time, but collectively it really adds up to kind of a nice varied surface. And see how I'm doing this? I'm just kind of working it in a given area before I move on to my next area. See this right here? I'm just working the corner. I'm not going like this around the whole thing. I'm just kind of working one area at a time to get that really nice smooth transition of tone from dark to light. Okay. This black right here really makes a pretty dramatic difference, I think. Now, I mean, you could go, let's say, you're a little bit gun-shy about going to something as dark as that. Well, if you have a gray, you can put that gray on there first if you want to. Gray's a little bit different, but, it can work. And then you can go to the black. Okay. I tended to tone things down quite a bit, too. It decreases a certain layer of intensity, but maybe that's for the best. I don't want everything completely intense all the time. The intensity is the relative brightness of a piece, like the relatively really glowing blue, really vibrant blue. And when you lay down the black over it, it kind of dulls it out a little bit. It does make it darker, though, so it increases the value range, but it decreases the intensity range, the degree of brightness of that given blue. So it kind of mutes it a little bit, or a lot. But I tend to think that what I gain in value, increasing the lighting of a piece, more than makes up for the loss of some of the intensity of the brightest parts of the scene in terms of the blue, in this case. Okay, so see that right there? It feels a little bit different. Now for me, this is a real big open area of light there. I don't know if I like that too much, okay? I might want to bring some tone in there. It might be too light for me, okay? So let's do something like this. Let's just go to, let's try the Caribbean blue, okay? Let's just come right in here. I'm not going like this. I'm going from here into it like this. I'm kind of streaking it in there. Yeah, looks pretty good. Kind of has this glowing kind of green grassy area. Well, it's not real green. It's kind of bluish aqua or whatever color you call it. And I like it. Let's add quite a bit more of it, okay? Really start to brighten it up a little bit too and warm it up. So maybe it's a little kind of warmer in the foreground. As it transitions up, it gets a little bit cooler and less intense, right? How's this one looking right here? We'll put that black over it. Let's apply a little bit more of this Caribbean blue in here, and let's see if we can kind of increase that glow and intensity again. Okay, and you can, sometimes. Provided there's not like a really thick slathering of black or something like that. But if it's kind of more of a grayish tinge like that, you can go back over and add lighter tones into it. It's not going to lighten it up, but it can potentially brighten it up by making the colors a little bit more saturated and, kind of heavily applied like that. Okay, I think that looks okay there. It's a little bit of a strong glow up there. I don't know if that's too light. Maybe it is. This is where, I don't know, this is where these scenes tend to take a little bit more time than I think, because I like doing all this little fine-tuning stuff. Okay, I'm going back into a really light blue like this, okay? And let's just kind of streak this across on here like this. Let's kind of create a little bit of a stronger horizon glow, okay? Let's go to this light blue right here from Marvy. Kind of going from where this twilight thing, where there's just a little bit of light on the horizon, I think. Okay, so then this is a big open area of light right there, and I've just kind of have a little bit of streak of kind of lightness in there now. Okay. Fine tuning here. Okay, now see this area up here? Remember what I was saying, that if you made it, you know, a certain degree of lightness. Now I think that's fine, but let's bisect that, okay? This is not light in here anymore, right? It's dark. But let's take this Prussian blue here, and let's put a little streak across here like this. Okay. Now, see how that's dark there? Now what is this now here in comparison to that? That area up there is light, because this area right here is darker next to it. Right? So, light and dark is all relative. If you make something too dark, you can't really remove ink, you know, unless you're doing some kind of bleaching process. But if it comes to value, light and dark, if you make something too dark, unless it's black already or something like that, solid black, you can still kind of make something lighter in relation to something else just by putting something darker right next to it. Okay, so it's a really forgiving type of process like that. It's not like, oh my gosh, you know, now, I mean, if you tone out the sun or something like that and it's way too dark, I mean, you can put some darker tones next to it, you know, but it's going to be a very muted sun or something like that if it's a light source type of thing. But you just change the areas around it a little bit and you should be fine. Okay, let's see. I was applying that black with that sponge. Let's put some black on this paper towel right there. Now, honestly, this is kind of like finger painting, okay? Stronger vignette. I call this tipping the edges. I don't know why I call it that. It's getting the tips, I guess, at the corners of the card a little bit darker. Kind of brings the focus in on the our two characters in there too, by making the perimeter one step darker when you make the perimeters, or whatever areas of your scene, one step darker. By relation, anything that's lighter than the darkest of areas seem, by relation, one step lighter, okay? So to make this darker right here on the edge, then proportionately, everything else that's lighter than that gets that much lighter, okay? That's contrast that we're working with. takes on a little bit of a different kind of spirit to it too. I don't know, there's a calm, kind of a calmness, a quietness that we associate with, I don't know, let's say 2 a.m. or something like that. I mean, that's not supposed to be 2 a.m., but I don't know, just kind of when you move into, I think my paper towel's falling apart. Yeah, there's a certain type of stillness in certain types of color combinations or value relationships. The darker the values, I don't know, it tends to have a little bit of a different spirit. Not that I don't want high noon or something like that. I just don't want to do 3 different scenes and 3 different color schemes in one video. It would just take forever. Okay, so there we go right there. Now, I could add, I mean, it would really enhance these pieces to work in with some additional imagery, like foreground imagery on them. I'm not going to do that on this scene, okay? Or these 3 pieces here. That wasn't kind of my purpose of doing these scenes right here. I just wanted to get my hands in it. The inks, thinking about lighting and whatnot, and I can tell you, I'm full immersion by this point in time now. After doing these 3 pieces right here, I think my brain is kind of engaged, and I can tell because I don't want to stop with whatever ink I'm using. I just want to, I don't know, I feel compelled to keep working some different type of aspect of the piece. All right, just some cotton balls right here. Where does it say that? It's 100% cotton, okay? Use 100% cotton ball if you're doing this type of thing that I'm going to do next. I got to go over to Target to buy some better cotton balls, though. These ones are like, I don't know, they feel like seconds or something like that. But let's get some textures on here. I could really increase the depth of these pieces with some additional imagery, okay? But let's get some additional depth with the use of texture and lighting in here in the form of white pigment ink applied right over the top of my dye-based inks, okay? Now, impressions made with a stamp onto this glossy cardstock using any kind of oil-based pigment ink, it just is not going to dry, okay? Or it takes a long time to dry. I'm not doing that on here. I'm just kind of applying a very light and thin application of pigment ink onto my scenes, okay? So I'm not going for these real thick impressions of pigment ink, so I don't have to worry about the drying aspect of things, okay? So let's apply some of this pigment ink, like, say, here on the horizon. We have this little horizon glow working into this one. And I don't, it's not going to be I have a lot of ink on here. Okay, blot some of it off right now. I was going to say it's not going to make a big change, but I just got this big slathering of ink on there. So I'm just taking it down here, and I'm just going to spread it around a little bit like this. Now you really have to kind of move this around. Like I've already laid down some, but I'm going to just switch off to a different part of the sponge and just I'm kind of mopping some of it off right here. So sometimes you end up removing more than you've applied, okay? Because you just kind of have to manipulate that white pigment ink on there. I always kind of lay it down in my lighter areas. It's always kind of in that transition zone between where light meets dark, where this application of media really pays off, okay? So let's see where light meets dark here. I can mask this off like this, and I can kind of enhance this glow right down here, okay? For me, it's going to represent, it kind of represents some mist in this meadow right here. And see, I've already established some lighting down there just by simply not stamping out all of that ink. Remember where I'm oscillating my lights and darks? Now I can utilize the lighter areas that I've retained by not toning them out all the way, and I can apply some of this down in here, and it looks like this kind of low line fog. In this case, it won't, look like that in like the sea one. It's not going to be, mist in the meadow, but I'll show you where this comes into play. See this right here, how it's kind of, we're creating kind of distance in here. Here's this hillside right here, and it looks like there's a little bit of a dip, and then this is where another high point on the meadow up here. So there's this oscillation of terrain, okay? It's defined by lighting, it's going dark, light, okay? And here, this water is down here, okay? It's lighter right here. So, all right. You can just apply some like this. I have very little on this cotton ball right now. So it's a very dry brush effect. So it's like creating this real kind of foggy, misty morning for this individual right here. Going out on his property maybe and going for a ride or something in the early morning before sunrise. I don't put it everywhere because you want there to be an oscillation of it so that you have some sharp areas and you have some soft areas, and they play against each other just like light and dark. All right, so you have this right here. See what it's kind of, if I can get this to focus in, sorry. Okay, so I've applied it down here. It's transitioning up. Remember where light meets dark, and you see I've put it in here. In this area and right here, it was light, so where light meets dark right here, and where light meets dark up here. Let's put some around at the base of the rider here. When you kind of put this type of application of media with the subject matter too, it really kind of ties things together a little bit more. So this horse right on the legs right here, but I don't cover the whole thing up. I mean, you could, it would really put it in the distance, but do you see where that horse now is kind of within this mist right here, because I've transitioned some of it from the base and up like that. But again, this is kind of an area where light meets dark. The darkness just happens to be, the horse. You can say, okay, how thick is this horse? Well, by relation, it's, I don't know, it's probably like 5 feet high, that mist or whatever, because that's how probably high that, horse is right there. Okay. All right, let's see if there's an area in here for this mist. I've made things fairly dark in here, so I don't know if there's really a great spot in here for this type of texture, soft texture. Maybe I'll try a little bit on the horizon. I'm not putting too much down because there is just that tiny little thin strip of lightness down there. The sponge, when I'm using, the cotton ball, when I first start using these, it's to use when I use this cotton ball for like the third or fourth time, it gets a little bit better because it starts to get a little bit more saturated with pigment ink. When it's brand new like this, it's kind of a little bit more of a... I get little blobs sometimes. Okay, now it's starting to come together. It's spreading out on the cotton ball. Okay, but anyways, it's a little kind of horizon glow down there. I've gone over, some of the palm trees too, but no matter. Okay, this area that's in light right here, okay, let's go where light meets dark. Okay, see that tip of that palm island like that? Let's put it right here where light meets dark. Okay, so doesn't that kind of increase this notion of lighting a little bit more by having that little area like that a little bit lighter than the rest of the palm island? It gives the island kind of a little bit more of a three-dimensional type of feel. Okay, a little bit of the spindrift coming off of the crest of the wave, maybe. You can put a little pigment down there. Yeah, I'll put a little bit on this kayak right here as well, just at the tip of the kayak. Yeah, actually, coming off the crest of those waves looks really good. Let me add a little bit more of that. I thought it was too dark in here, but for some of this, but I don't know, it looks pretty good. Now this, I always mention that the pigment ink dries darker than what it looks like when it's been freshly applied. So go a little bit lighter than what you think looks ideal, because when it dries, it's going to become much more transparent. Okay, but anyways, look at the waves here. Yeah, with that kind of mist coming off of it, it kind of gives it a little bit more of a dreamy type of feel in here, doesn't it? It really changed kind of the textural range of the piece too by having these real soft areas in here. It looks like soft lighting, doesn't it? But again, you're just utilizing the lighting that you've established by not toning it all out, and you're using it for your benefit by, applying some of this white pigment ink back into it like that. Okay, now that, I would say that one really, I don't know, improved it in this one too. But, I don't know, I think it really improved that one in terms of kind of visual interest by just increasing that textural range. Okay. Where light meets dark. Let's put these two characters and they're walking home, and it starts to get a little bit foggy. I used to take night classes sometimes when I was in school, back in my school days, and at Long Beach State, sometimes your car is, you park like a mile from your class. It's, parking lots are so far, and I think, I don't know, I've parked at different parking lots throughout my, my school years, and one of them was, on the other side of the football field, and sometimes walking back at night on this pathway, looking over the football field, it was, there was all this mist, low-lying mist, like hovering a foot off the ground once in a while. I didn't see it too often, but a couple times, and it was really kind of magical, underneath the, the lamps. And a lot of times I was, you're the only one out there at that hour too, But that's what I think about when I see things like this, and walking like in the moonlight or something like that in the fog. Alright, so that is that. I really put a lot of mist, or this pigment ink over the top of that tree right there, and it really lightened it up. Okay, see those characters like that? Isn't it fun from a textural standpoint and a lighting standpoint? It's kind of the oscillation of lighting too. I applied some of that pigment ink here, 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 and kind of up here. I didn't apply it everywhere in there, although I did use quite a bit of it, but you kind of oscillate that a little bit too, where it's not just uniformly applied. So you're just kind of varying things, with whatever media you're working with. And by doing so, you get kind of a stronger, richer surface quality by not having everything uniformly applied over the whole piece in general, but kind of within the piece as well. Okay, that was a really light application of light on dark. And with the inks, you're going kind of dark on light, okay? You're using a white piece of paper, you're applying different, colors of ink. It's getting darker and darker and darker, right? Well, this is a way to add a very soft application of light on dark in the form of the pigment ink, very thinly applied in here. And you can go with, I really like these acrylic paint pens, okay? If you look up, like, white paint pen on Amazon or something like that, there's so many different brands that come up. I have a feeling they're the same company, but just they're selling these pens to different manufacturers, who are, branding them because they all look the same. It's either that or just the same company is just selling them under the name of different brands. But this one's the Miaosun paint pen. Let's see if I can get it going here. Seems like it's kind of clogged on me. Or dried out. I've used these so much. These are really cheap. They're like $2 a pen. And they're so cheap they're sold in, here it comes. I just haven't used it for a while, so you kind of trigger release it with that spring release. Don't pogo stick it though, otherwise you might get a big blob of ink coming out of there, and you really have to shake it up. Here we go. Okay, so this is a very crisp light into dark application. Okay, let's see if it really stand. And I like to apply it on tops of my tufts of grass in this case, on waves or whatnot. It's a little bit lighter there in the distance, and the darker it is, the less of these little highlights I lay down, okay? Now this is a fairly dark scene right here, so I'm not going to apply too much of it, but you can see this little passageway of little sparkles of, I don't know, whatever it would be. It's like dew on the grass in the moonlight, kind of glistening. Here's this water down here, so you can do what they call specular light. It's light that's brighter than white. Kind of twinkling in that, I don't know, whatever, on that surface. Okay, now it's getting dark up here. You can put a few stars in the sky. You can do different constellations if you want to. Do the Big Dipper, whatever. Cluster them a little bit. Everyone does these, and it's like exactly a 1/4 inch apart. And I have to kind of remind myself of doing that. I'm telling myself as well as anyone else when I say that. And right there, they're walking under a kind of a star-filled sky. Now, I could have just stamped an image out there like a Milky Way or something like that, and you know. But I didn't want to do. I just wanted to take some existing scenes and see what I could do with them. Okay, this one has some crashing waves and stuff. Perfect opportunity. I love this pen in waterfall scenes as well. I love it in any kind of scene, but you know, the ones where you have like a lot of little splashing water. It's just so much fun. As you apply this, these types of little touches like that, we're really focusing on detail. Very small details when you're talking about one dot at a time. So when you do this, as you do this, be mindful and just hold it up, you know. Lay 2 or 3 dots down and see how it's affecting the overall piece, you know. As you lay it down like that, hold it at an arm's distance, take a look. No, I say that because I would be prone to adding too much, okay? I'm getting, you know, a little bit more used to it over the years, but still, I have a lot of fun applying these, and I can get carried away and just apply too much of it, so just be mindful and hold it up at arm's distance. And your eye, trust your eye, and it'll tell you if you've added enough of something. Like a lot of times people ask me, you know, how do you know when to stop? How do you know when, you know, you applied the ideal amount of whatever texture, media, color, whatever that you're working with at the time. And just kind of hold it out at a distance and take a look at the overall scene, you know. Don't focus in on too many tiny little areas, but just kind of taking the overall. And chances are, you know, you'll really get a good feel of, you know, the degree of completion of whatever you're working on at the time. It could be a certain color, whatnot, the black vignette of something, anything. You know, you get a better idea of it, kind of holding it out and getting a good idea of the overall. Okay, so let's take a look at this one right here. You see those specular light in here, shining off the water. Down here it's used as splashes, and up here it's used as stars. Okay, doesn't it make that area up there more interesting by having a little bit of texture up there? But what are we doing? We're also applying light back into dark, so we're creating a certain type of contrast and texture in the form of some stars up here. But those star textures up there are the same textures that represent splashing water down here. So you get this continuity between the most distant areas of the scene to the closest areas of the scene. And when you get that type of textural and lighting continuity like that, it brings harmony to the overall scene like that. It represents different things, but it's still the same texture. Okay, so with all these little tufts of grass in here, this one potentially could last, you know, take forever. I'm not going to do that though. I kind of laid down some textures on here that just represent lighting, but maybe we can do some little clusters of these dots like that, where maybe it represents something like, I don't know, some kind of little wildflower, pearly everlasting or something. Little white flowers in the moonlight. You know, something like that. So from a textural standpoint, it just kind of brings a little bit more variation to this otherwise kind of monotonous terrain right here, but maybe by bringing this into it like this, it's almost like you're introducing stars into this bottom area down here, and I don't think anyone that looks at a sky full of stars looks at it and says, oh my gosh, that's boring, because there's, thousands of, similar little point of light up there. So it's really a really great opportunity to take that convention of a little dot and apply it to your scene. These pens are great. They work a little bit better than a gel pen, because with the gel pen I'm drawing on top of the white pigmenting. Sometimes that gel pen, it starts to clog up a little bit where I'm going over into that white paint. Gel pens are great though. I've used them for many, many years, okay? And I still will, but I don't know, I've kind of switched over these pens. These pens work pretty good. You just have to shake them up every time because they are an acrylic paint. Alright, so stars in the sky and flowers down below like that. Well, contemplate a vase. Okay, so anyways, this video has lasted much longer than anticipated, but I got into the spirit of it in terms of lighting and texture and shadow and all those different things that I tend to really like in my pieces. Okay, let's see what we have here. Alright, 3 different scenes. Let's see if I need to change my exposure right here. The exposure is pretty good. This is pretty much, I'm looking at my my back screen on my camera, and I think this is pretty true to the intensity and value of these pieces in terms of light and dark, so of what they look like. So anyways, yeah, let's take a look at the overalls. I don't know, it tended to be kind of a lesson on lighting in many ways and ink applications right here, but just the variation of certain types of colors, light and dark, okay? This area up here was a certain darkness, but I've just kind of put a streak of darkness across there, where that became lighter now, just because this streak is in here. So you get this little, kind of a little bit of a light, dark, light type of thing down here, except just down here it's much lighter than this one up here. You got that little horizon glow in there. The horizon right over here isn't as strong anymore because I put some white pigment ink over the top of what used to be about this value of darkness right there, okay? But that little bit of white pigment ink really made for a really great passage of light in here by lightening up some of that black impression of the Palm Island, okay? And same thing right here, putting a little bit of that pigment ink on that kayaker there. Really created a strong relationship between this kayaker and these background trees, because it has that same type of white pigment ink and transition of dark to light on itself. Oscillation of light and dark in here, left the crest of the waves a little bit lighter. And from a textural standpoint, we got all those little stars in there. Same thing happening in here, that oscillation of light and dark throughout this piece right here. For the most part, it's pretty centrally lit, like right in here, but you just break it up with these little streaks of tone going across there. So here it is used in water, here it is used in grass, and here it is again used in grass down here. Now you can do these different types of oscillations with whatever color scheme you want to go with. This could be a completely green grassy meadow, but just oscillate it a little bit and don't see it as one whole area of grass to be equally addressed in terms of the amount of ink that you use on it, okay? That way you get this stronger sense of distance too when you apply inks in a little bit, kind of a different, a different degree and amount that you would use on there. And then, of course, you can manipulate the different values of inks that you use on there, And it comes out different a lot of times, different every time, because you might use more of a certain color on here than the next time, maybe use more darker blues on this next time, less lighter blues. I don't know. It changes all the time. If I were to do this scene again, it would come out slightly different each time, just because of the sheer amount of, the variation of inks that can be, applied on here. And I do things a little bit differently every time anyway. Okay, so anyways, I guess that's about it. Anytime you kind of feel like kind of getting back into something, I don't know, don't think about creating some kind of masterpiece. Kind of just focus on the fundamentals in terms of ink applications, lighting, whatever those types of things it is that's valuable to you in your own scene. I'm heavy on texture and lighting, okay? So that's the type of thing that I'm focusing on. A lot of people have it in terms of maybe compositional types of aspects of things and whatnot. If it's compositions that you like to do, then you can just do a bunch of stamp sketches like that and don't even think about finishing them off right now. Just get back into the swing of getting those stamps and inks and media and tools in your hand and just kind of do it. All right, now, so these ones turned out really fun for me. I wasn't really thinking about that. I thought I was just going to do kind of more exercises in terms of whatever, but I don't know. I felt like really finishing off these pieces in terms of, the finishing touches on here, so that's the way it went. Okay, if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. Thanks as always for tuning into the channel. And as always, happy stampscaping.